after a couple of days of rain here in Greensboro, we're back outside in the Sukkah. Dave, it is really good to be with you, Dave Delman. You're originally from where, Dave?
I'm from Miami, Florida.
I know the feeling.
We're two Floridians.
That's right. Wow. So tell me a little bit about your background. We'll tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Yes.
And your Jewish story.
Well, I grew up in Miami, Florida. I was born there and lived there until I was 16. My mother and father adopted me at birth, and we had a wonderful home. We practiced conservative Judaism, and we were members of a shul that was about 3 blocks away from our home. It was called Temple Emanuel, and I was bar mitzvahed there. Many wonderful memories. About a year and a half after I was born, my sister Helena Delman was adopted, and we had a very good life in Miami. When I turned 16, my mother and father passed away, and Helena and I moved to Greensboro, North Carolina. So that's how we got here. I ended up graduating from Page High School and went to Guilford College and received a degree in accounting and became a CPA.
Right. And that's been your life's calling.
And that's what I've done for the last 43 years.
Right.
So it's been a very good career, and very much enjoyed what I've done. In 1977, I met my wife, Jo, and we have one daughter, Jennifer, who's now 29, and she's graduated from college. She went to Emory University and received a doctor of physical therapy, and she's got a good job and is very happy. So I do have an interesting story to tell you.
Yeah, sure. Let's hear your story. That's really what this is about.
In 2018, Jennifer asked that we take a 23andMe test, genetic test, and it was primarily to determine if I had or we had any genetic medical issues. And so we took the test. This would have been in December of 2018, and the test came back. Thank goodness there was no genetic issues, but what it did come back with was a confirmation that we found my biological mother, which we never would have found because of the adoption. There was a firewall on the adoption process, and so my birth mother took the 23andMe, and the rest of the family and everybody's related. So how that gets interesting is that Gloria, my birth mother,
And she's visited here, right?
and she did. She came to Greensboro in December of 19, and there were 15 family members that came, and it was around Christmas holidays, and so we came to a Friday night service, the whole family, and it was a gorgeous service, and to this day they still talk about what a magical evening it was at Temple Emanuel on the Friday night services. And so she lives in Sacramento, California, and Jo and Jennifer and I have been there 4 or 5 times to visit. And we do have a routine every Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We have a Zoom call, and in Sacramento it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Gloria's got a sister who recently passed away. Her name is Yael, and Yael and her husband Johnny live in Israel, and they're 7 hours ahead of us. And so what we would do on our, it was actually Skype, not Zoom. For Gloria it'd be 10 a.m. and here it was 1 p.m. and in Israel it was 8 p.m.
Right.
And so we would have a combined call, and that was very special. Yael and Gloria have a brother. His name is Albert. He lives in Pennsylvania. But Yael, there's a very special story. And again, she passed away 3 weeks ago. She touched a lot of people. Yael grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and she was a programmer. And she did programming for a company that had a contract with the Israeli IDF. There were military people that came over here to learn the software and then went back to Israel. And eventually, Yael moved to Israel, and she worked for this software programming company. And about a year after she was there, she was recruited into the Mossad.
Right. Mossad being the intelligence agency, foreign intelligence agency for Israel.
The intelligence agency, and she had a career with them for 18 plus years, and she was very involved as an intelligence officer. And so there's many things that she did that people don't know about, but there was one case that she worked on that is very public, and that had to do with originated with the Munich massacre at the Olympics
in 1972.
In 1972.
Right.
And the organization, most people know this, is Black September terrorist group, and the Mossad they had a mission, and that mission was to find the participants and terminate them. And Yael was stationed in Beirut, Lebanon, as an agent there, and the mission where the Israeli military came in and assassinated the Black September group. She was actually involved with that because she was stationed in Beirut, Lebanon. So there's a whole story about that, and as she passed away, there was a beautiful eulogy that was provided by a head of Mossad. Yael was a Israeli hero, and made a real contribution to their security and existence.
Yeah, if I recall from the words of that eulogy, the Mossad head, former Mossad head, called her one of the most important people to ever serve the people of Israel in terms of what her efforts were. That's a pretty high tribute in a country that can lay claim to some pretty important figures over the years.
Yes.
And I'm reminded of the story, for example, of Eli Cohen, who was an operative in Damascus, Syria. There was a book about him that was written that was called Our Man in Damascus. And one of the tributes given to Yael, they called her Our Woman in Beirut.
Yes.
And she really played that essential role. Those, the Black September group, they were part of the PLO. They killed 11 Israeli athletes at the Olympics that year. And group that went after just to make sure that justice was served, because it wasn't going to be served any other. There was going to be no accountability any other way.
Yeah, there was no other way to handle that. And again, she lived in Beirut, Lebanon, for about 2 years, and she was there under the auspices of making a film. And so
that was her cover story.
That was her.
Yeah.
That was her cover story.
Yeah.
And she became integrated into the community there, and was able to identify where they lived, and that was the intelligence where the IDF could come in and do what they needed to.
Did you ever in your life imagine that you would find these type of stories out about your own background, about your own broader connections, Dave?
No, absolutely not. And I really didn't seek it out either. I was very happy with my childhood and my mother and father. And they unfortunately passed away at a young age, and I understood that and reconciled it. And then this DNA testing with 23andMe just opened a chapter that I didn't know existed.
It's amazing.
And Gloria and I have become very close, and we have a lot of similarities. So just a couple things that I didn't mention. Gloria was going to the University of Miami, and she had a boyfriend who's my biological father, and his name is Harry Costas. So Harry was Greek, and Gloria is Jewish. Her maiden name was Epstein, and what came back from 23andMe was that I was 51% Ashkenazi Jew and 49% Greek. And
great, I love it.
and part of that process, they list people's names and what percentage your DNA is of theirs. And it started with 12.5%, who's my cousin, Gloria's sister's son, and he was the person that actually made the connection. But they have all these people that are listed. And I was looking at the names, and this is before I found out about it, and about half the names were traditionally Jewish names, and then the other half were traditionally Greek names. And I said, well, that's interesting. And so there was a good explanation for that. But Gloria was living in Miami. She went there to go to University of Miami. And the other thing that just makes this story interesting is that she was an accounting major at the University of Miami.
Tells you.
And in 1952, she was the only woman in the class, and so that was clear. And my mother was a bookkeeper and an accountant, and of course, I didn't know what my mother did because I didn't know what accountants did. But when I got to Greensboro to live with my mother's brother, whose name is Archie Kotler. So it was Archie and Ruth Kotler and my cousin Jeff Kotler. So one of the things that he did, he said, well, you're graduating from high school, what do you want to do? And I said, I really don't know, like most young people. And he said, I have a friend of mine who's a psychologist, and I want you to meet this psychologist. And so I did, and he interviewed me, and there was a battery of tests that he had me take, which were occupational related tests. And so I took the tests and interviewed with them, and they had columns for all the different occupations, and they graphed it like this. And so I still have a printout of this graph, and it kind of went like this, and when it went to the accountant, it went like this, and then it came back down and sort of went like this. I said, okay,
You must really need to be an accountant.
Yeah.
All the signs were pointing in that direction. That's amazing. Dave, I want to shift for a moment, because You've played an important leadership role in this congregation in Temple Emanuel, and this has been something that's been going on for decades. I mean, I remember you were one of the point people that I talked to when I was considering coming here back in 2003, and I don't want to go into that. Tell us a little bit about your involvement in Temple leadership. This is a community which is clearly important to you, and you served as president here. Tell us a little bit about the work that you did as president of Temple.
Yes. So Joe and I joined Temple Emanuel in 1992. We were actually married on the Green Street campus on the Sukkah, on the Bima, when there was a Sukkah there, because our anniversary is October 2nd. So it was Sukkot.
This is a perfect setting.
and it was just like this. It really was. And so that's Rabbi Task was the rabbi, and Rabbi Task married us. But like a lot of people do, they go through a period where they kind of leave a congregation, not leave a congregation, but they're unaffiliated. So we were just unaffiliated. And then in 1992, our daughter was born, and we joined Temple Emanuel. They found out I was a CPA, and that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. And so I joined the finance committee, and in 2002, it was actually July 1st of 2002 when Sherry Dickstein started her president. I came on the board as treasurer in 2002, and so since then I've been treasurer most of that period of time. There were two other people that were treasurers when I served as president. So I served as president from 2008 to 2010.
That was a particularly challenging time in our country.
It
Great
was
recession.
It was a very challenging time, and there was a lot of uncertainty. Everybody will remember the stock market basically dropped in half. It was the Dow Jones was before the crash. It was slightly above 9,000, and it dropped to about 6,800. And so members of the congregation suffered. A lot of members suffered during that period, and unemployment happened. The real estate market fell out. The bubble was burst. We had the banking crisis. We had crisis with automobile manufacturers, unemployment, and so it was a challenging time to be treasurer of the congregation. It was a challenging time for everybody, really, and Rabbi Fred was the rabbi, and I think that the congregation actually got stronger during that 2-year period, because everybody was pulling together, and it was a struggle that everybody was working really hard to get through, and we did get through. People that stayed in the stock market eventually came out just fine, and of course the Dow now is over 35,000. So if you stayed in the market, you were just fine. But another significant thing that happened was we purchased the additional land at the cemetery, and that was a really interesting time, because in order to purchase that, we had to have a congregational meeting to approve the purchase, and that approval was done unanimously. I mean, we had a really good turnout to that meeting, and the purchase price of that land was $600,000, and so we really had to raise that money quickly, because the prior owner had an opportunity to sell that land. It was going to be an apartment complex that would have come right up to our cemetery, and we still have room at the historical cemetery, but there will be a time in the future where there won't be room. And we purchased a couple of acres and raised the $600,000, and actually ended up raising more than that, so that we had sort of a capital endowment in order to maintain the current cemetery and have money to make the improvements that will be necessary for them.
Yeah, I remember among the moves that we did at that time, I thought that was so wise, because we, and here maybe we're talking to generations from now, but what might it be like if part of the family is buried in one place and then part of the family is buried way out in a different part of town, which would really be now in the countryside is we're talking half an hour away or something like that.
Yes.
And I think that this really preserves the integrity of that. The other thing I remember from that time was that we could have been a community that said, well, let's get rid of a couple people on the staff. And instead, it was a very careful conversation that came to us as rabbis at the time and said, look, we think that we can solve this without losing really important people on our staff. It would require a bit of a decrease in terms of your compensation. And what did your rabbi say to that?
Said absolutely.
He said absolutely.
Yeah.
And because we know that our people here are really what power what we do.
Well,
Thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely.
And for taking care of your rabbis and all of our staff.
Yes, and our commitment to the rabbis and the staff here are just absolute 100%. And this doesn't go during my period as president, but here recently with the COVID and when the payroll protection program was enacted, we worked very hard to get a payroll protection loan, which has subsequently been forgiven, and that money was used to keep all of our staff, the rabbis, the administrative staff, the educational staff, maintenance, janitorial, so nobody had a break in service during that period of extreme uncertainty.
Correct. I'm very grateful for that. Well, Dave, thank you for today, and thank you for all that you've done for so long. Is there any other thing that you want to say at this time?
It's really an honor to be asked to have this, and very, very fond of the rabbis here and a wonderful congregation.
You called your aunt that you only recently discovered was your aunt. They called her one of the most important people in the history of the state of Israel. And I think now we can say, David, that you've really done your part to be one of the most important leaders of this congregation and for Jewish people in our area. And I would say much more broadly. So, Chag Sameach, my friend. Thank you again.
Rabbi Andy.
Take care.
You see that in slow motion?